thank you all for coming. And Bill?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Eastport Yacht Club. My name is Bill Phillips. I'm the fleet captain of the club. I'd like to start out by saying that I believe that it is the dream of every mariner to sail to a distant offshore island. And if this is your dream, you're in the right place. And when you're ready to make that trip, we want you to do so safely and with confidence. And we have several folks here today that are going to help you do that. Not here at the moment, but we'll be here a little bit later, is Bernard Jeanette. He is the owner of Faucets. Also, Mark Stevens of Faucets will be here. Also, I'd like to introduce, if she's around, Lily Colby and Debbie Huntsman from Mustang Safety Gear. You'll be hearing a lot more.
Lily's out in the hallway.
Okay.
Yeah.
She'll be here in a few minutes. And then finally, I'd just like to thank Al for his work in chairing the Bermuda Ocean Race Committee. So once again, welcome to the club. Enjoy your time here today. If we can be of any further assistance to you, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Al.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Lily, this is Lily Colby. She's from Mustang. She'll be part of the PFD workshop this afternoon. We've flown in the real pros. Tell everybody, Debbie does safety at sea.
I'm shy.
So you'll see them this afternoon. The first part will be Dawn. I'm just going to take 2 minutes to talk a little bit about what we're doing as an event committee chair to do, put on a real rig.
See y'all later. Who
So,
brought their life jackets?
Yay.
Excellent. Okay, afterwards, around the bar area, so it'll be very convenient. We can take a look at them.
I'm sitting
We'll see you
down.
later.
so I know many of you, not all of you. My name's Bert Bosser. My wife is Marilyn. We sailed J42 Allegiant. We've done Annapolis to Bermuda, Newport to Bermuda, and we're passionate about sailing. Old Texas expression, I wasn't born here. I got here as fast as I could. I didn't grow up sailing, but since 2014, it's been my passion. First time doing an event chair, so I'm leading all the people. My focus as a racer and now event leader is to put on a really great event for the racers. And I wanted to just take 2 minutes to tell you what we're doing. Technically, I'm a veteran. I did go to Army, so I know I'm in enemy territory. It is what it is. But very passionate about this thing. Events like this, we're trying to make bigger and better to share knowledge around safety and how you can get out long distance sailing on the bay, coastal cruising, not just going to A to B for the race. So that's why we're excited that everybody's here today, and we want to give you the best event possible. Next slide. So why do the race? You have two great partners. You obviously have Eastport Yacht Club here that's putting a lot of time and effort to make these events happen. Great hosting club. And we have a great partner in Bermuda. It's a wonderful place, the Royal Hamilton Amateur Dinghy Club. It's just fantastic. They open up the whole venue to you. They have daily events. It's just a great destination when you get there. So we couldn't ask for a better partner there as well. Next slide. Behind the scenes, we've been spending a lot of time to give the best and most affordable race possible. So we went back, we've looked at every race, every pricing strategy. We have an early bird discount, but what we've done is to say, like, how do we be the best value for money? I know that sailing's an expensive sport, believe me, I know, and the entry fees are a big deal. But what we've priced for you is, what I can tell you without a doubt, is the best and most competitive race on a per foot basis. What we're also doing is, we want to put the A in the A to B. And so we're reaching out to local Woodwind, we have the Pride of Baltimore, the Wilma Lee, all the aspects. We sat down with Eye of Annapolis to tell the story of the sailors. And what we're saying is we want this to be a local event that showcases the Annapolis part of the Annapolis to Bermuda. Next slide. And then we're telling your stories. So you'll see every Wednesday is Welcome Wednesday. We do a little post about each boat that's entered. Everything on social media is geared to telling your story as you prepare for the race, do the race, and then after you finish the race and celebrate. And so these are just examples of what we've put together. Erwin and our social media team has done these, fantastic job. And these will come out each Wednesday. You'll see them on our Facebook and Instagram. And then lastly, we're curating on YouTube, Instagram, everything. So we do lessons learned seminars. You can, as we tag people, you can watch the interviews. We try to share those stories again from the people that have lived the race. So today here, we're going to do this safety seminar thing. It's broken down into this classroom portion. On the boat portion, we have 3 great boats out there, largely set up so you put step on the boat, talk to the skippers, talk to their crew about how all the little intricacies of how they get across the start line. And then we're going to do a happy hour after we do PFD workshop. We will tee up our December 20th seminar. That will be sales and rigging, and Ullman Sales will be here to talk a little bit about the storm sales and some of the implications that has to meet those safety requirements. Last thing I want to say is we committed to one rating system, and then with an addition to that. So we moved from PERF and ORC to ORC only, and we're using that to curate both a ORC racing class and a performance cruiser class, so that as many people can participate in an attractive race for you based off of your boat's capabilities. And then we've added what we've called this rally class. And the rally class is just that. You don't get a rating, you're doing a rally kind of like a salty dog, but you're doing it in the auspices of the race, so you get to see what it's like the first time without having to worry about, oh, I have to buy 10 sails and 4 spinnakers and, you know, get my boat. Like, you don't have to go down that route, but you can enjoy the race and the camaraderie with everybody else. And then if you like it, then you make that decision later on down the road. So we're really excited about it. We have some boats that are already signed up in the rally class. It's the first time we're doing it, so we're learning a few things. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the Minty. So on your phone, you should be able to see you logged in.
Dual scan this thing when you got in, yeah? Anybody needs it?
Jan, I'll send it to you.
And then we'd like to see who you are. So just answer real time. So we got a good mix. We got some crew, skipper, we got some navigassers, we got a snacktician. So this one's like a sliding scale. If you slide as best it fits, it does 1 to 5. 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. We're interested to know, when you think about blue water sailing, what you're interested in. Is it a personal challenge or crew challenge? And then, or are you looking for opportunities to improve your skills? Okay, we're going to turn it over to Don. We're going to save this to the PFD workshop. Don? I'll drive your presentation. John Snellgrove is our safety chair. He's done the A to B multiple times, and he's led the safety chair committee here for many races. So thank you, Don.
Good morning, folks. Good morning. Great to see all these bright and shiny and caffeine-filled faces here. And there's more coffee out there. I'm Don Snellgrove, as Bert said. I'll be the safety chair for this race. I've done the safety chair. This, I think, will be my 3rd race as the safety chair. My background is, and it's a little weird, here we are out on the water, and Bert's got an Army background. My background is Air Force. I flew F-16s for 20 years, and then retired, and then sort of actively got into sailing. I don't know where the Navy Academy guys are, but they're not here within this race, not within us. I've done 4 A to Bs on our vessel, Himmel. Some of you may have heard of the boat. It's a 39-foot Daler sloop. We've done 1 Atlantic crossing, about 5 Annapolis to Newport races, Marblehead to Halifax, and down to Miami. So we've got about 25,000 miles on the boat. And what we'll be going through today is, in essence, what I think we've learned, but what a ton of other people have learned about how you can safely do offshore passages, and particularly race it. But more than just racing, we're not going to talk about boat speed or anything today. We're going to talk about, in essence, safety and what you need to do on the boat and how your crew needs to be trained so that you can do a 753-mile passage with security. So what we'll do is the schedule, Bert's already talked about this. The safety and equipment requirement presentation is what we're going to be doing here. Bert mentioned that we've got 3 boats out there, 2 on the A dock and 1 on the B dock, all of which are equipped and ready to, in essence, do an offshore race. And you don't have to go on all 3 when we get to that. You're certainly inclined to, but we'll have experienced crew and skippers on each of the 3 boats once we finish this, so you can look to see how we've implemented these requirements, because there's different ways to skin the cat. Okay, some things are very obvious, and you need a storm sail. Okay, we've got a storm sail, but how you put on extra bilge pumps and how you manage some of the other requirements can be interpreted in different ways and still meet the letter of the law. Then, of course, we've already talked about the PFDs and the Ullman and everything else that's going on here. A to B began 1979 with just 7 boats. It's 753 miles. Some of you may be very familiar with this. 120 miles is just getting out of the darn Chesapeake Bay, okay, which is a little bit unique when you compare it to, for example, the Newport to Bermuda race, where all they got to do, they got one decision to make. Am I going to go left or right, a block island, and then after that they head for, Bermuda, assuming they don't have to tack, which often they don't. So this race, in many cases, has more challenges than does the Newport to Bermuda race. It's a little longer, and it's certainly got shallow water, it's got commercial traffic, it's got light winds, especially in the bay, a host of things that can, fish traps, a host of things that can make the race a little bit more challenging. The RADIC, the Royal Hamilton Amateur Dinghy Club, they are wonderful guests. I'm not going to go into that, but they really, really do a great job in hosting all of the boats that get to Hamilton, Bermuda. And of course our title sponsor is Mustang, and you'll see more about them. So I'm gonna look at this one. This one's a little easier, there's less glare. This planning timeline is notional. It's not like where you can say, look, February to July. Well, heck, I'm already behind the timeline here, you know? I mean, here we are in November. But some of these things, and you'll see one of the key items that's on each of these bullets as you go through towards May of 2026, is working your checklists. And we'll talk about that more. But what I would encourage any of the prospective skippers and crew members to do is read the safety and equipment requirements for the 2026 race, which are up on the website. It's around maybe 12 to 15 pages of good stuff. And what I did before the first race that I did is I just read through it and I just checked. I said, yep, we've already got that. Oh, no, we don't have that. This one, oh, that's easy to do because I can just buy it, that kind of thing. And so you come up with your checklist, the things that you need to do to comply with the safety inspection. And your boat will be inspected. That's one of the jobs of our safety committee is we have 10 inspectors, one of which will be assigned to every boat that's in the race. And we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline for that, but your boat will get personally inspected by one of our knowledgeable safety inspectors, and you'll need that sign-off before you can enter the race. Boat repairs, there's a lot of things. Enter the A to B race. Bert mentioned you can already do that. Do it by the 31st of December if you want to get the early bird discount. I would start looking at crew members. You know, if you haven't already, or if you're a crew member and you wish to be on a boat, there's a vehicle to do that as well on the website. But now is the time to go ahead and get a commitment, because it is a time commitment for these people. You know, you're gone for 10 days at least. The race is 6 to 7. You got another 3 days if you're going to hang around Bermuda and do the award ceremony and all that. So you're gone 10 days one way or the other, assuming you're not doing the return. And so crew members need to plan that into their vacation and everything else, let alone some of the training requirements that you're going to want to do with your crew beforehand. I'll also mention book accommodations. I think that's after the 1st of January is when you can book your dockage. Anyway, at RADIC, I think they're open on the 1st. But accommodations in Bermuda, that's not required. We have never done that on Himmel. We just sleep on the boat. You know, it lowers the cost, and I think there's some camaraderie in doing that we enjoy. So we don't book accommodations. Some boats are a little more Spartan, and certainly they might wish to do that. CPR first aid training can be gotten in a multitude of places. The safety at sea training is a requirement that 2 people on each boat, or 1/3, whichever is greater, have safety at sea training. The safety at sea training, how many people have gone through the safety at sea training? Wow, I'm impressed.
And how many in the room are moderators that teach it?
Okay, all right, we got 1 moderator. It's a little different this year. Go ahead, yes.
You have 2 moderators.
2 moderators, okay, great. Okay, safety at sea training is a little different this year. It used to be at the end of March, and it still is. But the first day, which used to be in seminars in the classroom, is now strictly done online. And the second day, where you're in the water with your real PFD, getting into real life rafts and doing the cold water training and everything else, that will be done at the end of March. And you need to have, as I said, you know, two people or 1/3 of your crew go through the full 2-day session. Okay, the first one is easy, you can just do it online, but the second day will be done here in the local area. I think they've got a place, a pool up between here and Baltimore that they've done. I'm not here to promote it, I'm just here to tell you that you can do it. I think we'll probably, Bert, is Bert here? Is Bert still here? Do we are we gonna have a link to the Safety at Sea training sign up, or do people just Google it and find out where and when it is?
We can do. It's changed a lot since I was in like the last cohort that
Yeah.
went the 2 days. I think
Yes.
they still do that, but I think it's all online.
Well,
so
the
we
first,
can-
the first day is online and the second day is in the water.
So we can post something on our website to help people navigate
Hey,
John.
Don, I think this year in Annapolis, it's gonna be 2 days of in the water only.
Yes.
There will not be a lecture this year. And it's gonna be changing locations over to My Tags, which is over by the airport at PWL.
Okay, so you'll be able to go, I think, Saturday or Sunday to the water training. But before you do that, you're gonna wanna do the online class. It's very, very helpful. And if you've never been in the water with your PFD and have it auto-inflate as you jump in and see whether or not your crotch straps really crotch, you know, and if, and the challenges of getting into a life raft with all of your gear on, to include your foul weather gear, it's worth its weight in gold. So that's the Safety at Sea training. And then we'll talk about practicing with the crew in the shakedown. Okay, we use the US SERs as our basis for this, but we modify them in some cases to make it maybe a little bit less stringent, or in some cases maybe a little bit more stringent, depending upon what the situation is. And they have been updated this year. If you did the race in 2024 and you look at what the SERs are for 2026, there are a few changes, 2 notable ones, and I'll go over those as we go through the presentation here this morning. Okay, but this is where they are. They're posted. You can read them. I highly recommend you print them out, as I said, and just go through each item and see whether or not you comply or you don't. This is where you'll find all of the items, to include the general race forms. So review them. Go through your boat with the SCR in hand. Like, one of the things it says is, you know, you've got to have lifelines, and the lifelines got to be so tall. Well, and the lifelines can only move 2 inches one way or the other. In other words, they can't be really loose. Well, this is the perfect chance to just go through your boat with a measuring tape and check it out. Tightening your lifelines isn't rocket science, you know, but you do want to check these kind of things. Figure out what you need, and then come up with a schedule on how you're going to comply with it. I will say this, the first time I did this race on Himmel was in 2014, and there are some expenses, as you'll see, to get your boat ready. Whether it's a trysail, if you're going to use a trysail, or a storm jib, or you know, the second bilge pump that's manually operated from down below. But those are like one-time costs. Once you get through that, the recurring costs for a future offshore race is a much, much smaller percentage, because a lot of these things, they're sticky. You know, you got a storm jib, you got a storm jib. It's not likely to require you know, additional costs, assuming you're not using the sail that much and you have to replace it, which often is the case. You don't use these things too often. There are some recurring costs, like having your life raft repack or something along those lines, or you know, new flares, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's a one-time cost, and then after that, it's much more incidental. We talked about the physical inspection of your boat. We can deal with that. If your boat's here in the Annapolis area, that's great. You know, if it's maybe on the Delaware shore, we can. Some of our inspectors have the ability to travel to some distance. But if it's gonna be way up in New England until 2 days before the race, then we got a problem, okay? And so we likely won't have one of our guys do it. What we'll do is, it'll be the requirement of the skipper to hire a certified surveyor to do the inspection up in the New England area, because we can't wait until 2 days before to do the inspection. There's no time to remedy any issues or whatever else. So we'll deal with that. You know, that's one of the things that I'll be doing. Occasionally that happens, but most boats are here in this area, you know, for
Say schedule, does that mean,
schedule the inspection with the race committee. Yeah, so what,
so you registered the boat?
Yeah, you
think-
register the
think
boat.
You're ready to go.
Yep.
And then you just. good.
then we'll call you, we'll email you, and we'll work out a date and time and location that is convenient for both the skipper as well as the inspector. You don't have to do it online or anything. This is more personal. Some items may not be compliant. That's okay. We'll write it down if it's a discrepancy, and we'll work with the skipper as to how that, you know, issue can be remedied. Okay. In some cases, you may be able to obtain a waiver, but the waivers are rarely given. I would not bet your spats on getting a waiver if you've got some kind of a deficiency. But that's something you can talk about with me.
Talking about the inspection, it's actually something A to B mandates and obviously encourages and requires now. Other races don't have this, correct?
Some races don't. Like Annapolis to Newport race does not require physical inspection. Many other races do. Marblehead to Halifax does. Newport to Bermuda does. So the
And Annapolis to
majority,
Newport
they do not.
do not.
No.
So this is one way to get into a well-supported
Then
race.
we'll just skip it and go next year.
Well, what Annapolis to Newport does is they have a list of the safety requirements, but it's self-certified by the skipper.
Correct.
So the skipper just says, "Yep, I meet them all," and life goes on. You know how well the skipper is really doing that certification is sort of up in the air, but that has not been the case. The Annapolis to Bermuda race, for as long as I've been involved with it, has always required a personal inspection, and there's a lot of value to that. The inspector isn't just there; he's not some she's not a hard-ass guy who's sitting there, you know, trying to dot I's and cross T's and figure out a way to fail you. They're there to help you make sure you comply and address questions as well as possible solutions on how you might be able to meet the requirements. So it's not an adversarial relationship with the inspector. But keep in mind, you know, it's still the boat owner and the skipper who have the liability, and that's well stated on all the forms or whatever else. Now let's get into stability index. This will not be a stability index academic class, okay? No, what it is, we suggest a stability index of 115, but it's not a requirement. Most production boats will, if you delve into their documentation, it will tell you what the stability index is of the boat. If you get your boat ORC certified, they will provide a stability index of the boat. If it's less than 115, then you might look and see why it's less than 115. You know, if you've got a boat with a stability index of 85, you should not be racing a boat offshore. Okay, and this slide here tells you a little bit about what the stability index is. This one here, you see a stability index of 129, and that's where at 129 degrees of heel, which is more than 90 obviously, you know, you reach a point where the boat does not want to upright itself again. That's not to say that if you get down and you're inverted, it will not come back up. It often will with the proper waves that might get it to less than 129, and then she will self-right. But this just gives you an idea of what stability. Often stability indexes are maximum of around 60 degrees. You get to 60 degrees of heel, and that keel is pushing down with sufficient force that you get your maximum stability. You may not want to be at 60 degrees of heel, okay? And it's certainly going to make the boat hard to steer, but it is certainly a safe heel angle for. It doesn't mean you hit 60 degrees of heel, obviously, and the boat's going to go over. Although my wife sometimes thinks that's the case. Okay, we talked about, this is new. This is the first of the new requirements that we'll talk about, which is a physical keel inspection both in and out of the water. And you ask, well, why has this come up? It's come up primarily because a number of boats have had issues with hull keel joints and have capsized, lost their keel, and in some cases the whole crew's been lost. You can go back and see some of the incident reports that U.S. Sailing has had on this. And this is now becoming a requirement, not just for the Annapolis to Bermuda race, but you'll see it on the Newport to Bermuda races and other races as well because of the emphasis on it. So there's an external and an internal inspection. External, and this can be done by a qualified surveyor or the skipper. Okay, we're not saying you got to go out and hire a $300 an hour surveyor to inspect your keel. But you want to be, as a skipper, diligent about doing this. For stress cracks, checking the keel tip deflection, you know, where you can, does the keel move when the boat is on the hard? You know, how well does the keel look to be attached from the exterior? On the inside, you can check, obviously, you know, your keel bolts. Not all boats will have keel bolts, but for those that do, are they torqued to the proper torque? Find that out from the manufacturer. You know, on Himmel we've got like 10 different keel bolts, and you can tell is when you look at the interior of the boat. These are stainless steel and they're thick bolts, folks. You know, with nuts on top. You can tell a lot just from the general condition. You know, are they rusty? Is there any stress cracks around those bolts? Do you see any water that is constantly around these things that might possibly you know, incur, you know, rust, you know, in where there's no oxygen available? Yes, sir.
Just one thing I like to add, just for quick inspections, a lot of the boats that I race on have nail polish markers on the bolts lined up so you can tell if there's any twisting or loosening. So for quick inspections of checking the hull, you can just take a quick glance and see if those bolts have moved.
Good idea. Yep. Yep. That makes sense. So that's part of the internal one, checking the bolts as we just talked about. There is a form that's up on the web that the skipper can sign, and then you provide that to the, you know, to the, it's one of the documents that you provide. So do this, think about this now. This means your boat's got to get on the hard between now. Most of these boats are going to be on the hard anyway for some time during the winter. A few people will keep them in the water, but often, especially if you're racing it, you're going to want a clean hull. You may be taking it out, putting on new anti-fouling paint, whatever you want, but plan on this now because this is a new requirement. Rigging inspection. You can do this yourself. Generally what I do is, initially I had a rigger go up and do a professional inspection of the boat. And I had all of our rigging changed when the boat got to before we went across the Atlantic in 2018, we had the rigging changed because the boat was about 17 years old. I haven't had the rigging changed then, but I do a diligent inspection of everything from the mast and turnbuckles all the way up to the top of the mast. And actually, I have my son do that because, you know, he's lighter, younger, and seems to like it. So what the heck? I'm going to send him up there. And obviously, we talked already about the keel boats, bulkheads, and tabbing. The safety inspector is not out there to do a rigging inspection for you. That's incumbent upon the skipper to go ahead and do that. And any professional rigging folk will come out, and for a few $100, you know, they'll do it. There's a lot to check. Sails, main sail, duh, okay. 3 reef points is recommended, and if you've got 3 reef points, then you do not need a storm trysail. But you think, well, gosh, how many times do you go down to 3 reef points? Believe me, we've got hundreds of hours on our boat with 3 reef points and a storm jib, because the boat's a racing boat. You know, it's a racer cruiser, and it carries a lot of sail. And, you know, we're putting up in one reef when we get to probably around 18 to 20 knots of true wind. By the time we get to 25 knots of true wind, we're 3 reefs. And it's much more comfortable. We go faster with 3 reefs than we would with 2 or 1. There's less heel, less stress on the boat. Put a storm jib on it, and life is good. So we've lived for days with 3 reef points. 2 reef points, you can do 2, but 3 will bring you generally down to around 50% of your square footage on your mainsail. And for our boat, it's very comfortable, and we use it quite a bit. Obviously you've got a working jib, and we require a storm jib, and the specifications for these are in the SERs. Recommended. Remember, first 120 miles we talked about was in the bay, right? You know, a Genoa is your friend. You know, some of you may be more serious about racing than others, but there is nothing that will upset a crew and skipper more is to have a small jib up and get passed by, and when there's 6 knots of wind, by a boat with a Genoa that's doing a knot and a half faster than you. So a Genoa is a good opportunity for you to excel, particularly in the bay, or in some light conditions out in the North Atlantic as well. You don't have to buy these sails new. Most of the people know, how many people have heard of Bacon Sails right here in Annapolis? Okay. They've got a wide variety of sails, and that's where I bought my tri-sail. It's where I bought my storm jib. You know, I went in with the specifications I needed, and I was able to get them at a reasonable price. And they're generally, because they're very rarely used, they're in excellent condition. You know, it's not like they got thousands of miles on a storm tri-sail. Spinnakers, if you haven't practiced with spinnakers, that's something that you can certainly do before this race, whether it's an asymmetric or a symmetric. We carry both on our boat, but we're racing our boat every Wednesday, so the crew, I've got a bunch of my crew members filtered around here in the audience too. Don't raise your hands, I don't want to embarrass you. Okay? But spinnakers are a good idea. All of these items are listed in the SERs, and I'm not going to go through each one of these. There's different ways, for example, to attach your hatch boards so that they don't fall off the boat. They need to be secured in some form or another. You better know where your through hulls are, and each through hull should have a wooden plug so that you have a way of stanching the flow of water if the through hull were to break. Movable ballast is not a big thing. Everybody should have a head, although it's not required to have a head. You can have a properly labeled bucket, okay, and that actually meets the requirements of the race. I don't know, I've never inspected a boat that's got a bucket though. And then you've got all these items here. We'll talk more about bilge pumps here in a second. Cockpit and crew. This is what it's like. Every day on the race, Annapolis to Bermuda is just exactly like this. It's sunny, 2-foot waves, you know, about 12 knots of wind behind the beam. Life is good. Attachment points. You'll see one right here. This is for the tethers that you're required to have for each crew member on board. Care and feeding of the crew. Well, we already talked about the fitted bucket. Bunks sufficient for the off-watch crew. When you go on to these boats, take note of how each person has solved the challenge of making sure you're not falling out of a berth while the boat is at heel. Okay. These are called lee cloths. You'll see how we do it on Himmel. I know, Bert, you've got lee cloths on your boat too, as I recall.
Yeah,
You know,
picture right there.
yeah,
The top.
right here. Yeah, right here. There's a good lee cloth
There
here.
was a cushion
cloth.
improvement here. We actually changed this to make it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
the idea.
Yep,
Some half-naked crews.
yep.
Unidentifiable.
And lee cloths are great, especially for the middle bunks, you know, in your main cabin. One is, those are the best bunks on the boat anyway, assuming you've got lee cloths, because they're centered. There's less movement fore and aft because they're on the center of the boat, and they work out pretty comfortably for, and you're not in the bow, so if you've got winds, you know, off the bow V-berth can be pretty hard to live in, and so the middle and the aft work out very well. Stove, water tank, a delivery system. We'll talk about handholds. That's something that this is judgmental. But think about how you will get in 20 or 25 degrees of heel in big seas from the companionway area all the way up to the V-berth. What can you hold on to? Some of these boats, especially you get to like a 45 or a 50-foot boat, and it's a cruising boat made by, you know, one of the production companies, and they don't think about that. You know, you may need to put in handholds that safely allow someone to navigate all the way up to the V-berth and back. That is a problem on some boats. Go look at it. You know, go to one of these boat shows and go on a 48-foot new blah blah blah, and see where the handholds are. Yeah. I'm not saying any production names, but there are some are better than others. And then go on a Halberg Rossi, and you'll see how it's done. Okay. You know, it depends on the company, and it depends on what the intention of that boat is. Did I skip one? Yeah, okay. This is a requirement that you have a depiction of where all the safety equipment and the seacocks and the fire extinguishers and everything else that is going to be needed by someone on board the boat. Where's the EPIRB? Where do you stow the EPIRB? This is a great idea. If you don't know where all your seacocks are, by gosh, you better before you go on an offshore race. You will need to know because you've got to put a plug by each one. Okay, make one of these up for your boat, and we keep ours right above the galley, right by the EPIRB. Some people will go the extra mile and say, hey, I could use a depiction like this to show where I've stored my food. You know, where am I going to find the MREs, you know, the meals ready to eat, the freeze-dried food? Or where do I have my 2 jerry cans for, you know, the extra water that I'm required to bring on board? Well, you can embellish these and do a real good job with putting all of this stuff. First aid kits, you can see. Where are the pumps? Spare tools or spare parts and tools. You can really do a good job on it. And if nothing else, you might ask yourself, gosh, where are my spare parts? You know, what do I need for a race like this? You know, I've got a gentleman in the back who's Dave, who's one of our crew members, who in the middle of last weekend had to go find spare fuel filters, both primary and secondary, on the boat that he was on when the contaminated fuel quit the engine off of Cape May. Dave, you can talk about that later. but those fuel filters were critical for him in getting the engine started again. Bilge pumps. So you should have a permanently installed manual bilge pump that does 10 gallons per minute. Every boat generally has one of these. Okay, it's even production boats will have that. You will normally have an electric pump. Okay, I would check the float switch, see whether or not that float switch works, and it's easy to check it, you know, just by sort of raising it up. Most of them have, or they'll have a little knob on the outside that you can twist and activate the pump to see if it works properly. But here in red is something that a lot of boats will not have. That is one of the things that generally a boat that hasn't raced offshore will need. And that's a second manual pump of 10 gallons per minute, operable from below deck. So it's not one, normally the production ones are by the helm, and there'll be a handle, and it'll pump, and the water will come out either the aft part of the boat or possibly the side. But this is another one that is installed below deck that will again do 10 gallons per minute. Where you put this and how you discharge the water overboard is something that you know, you can discuss, you know, with myself if you have some questions, or you can look at the 3 different ways that this challenge has been solved on the 3 boats that are out there on the dock here this morning and early this afternoon. You'll see here, I think there, yep, right there, that's a keel, that's a bolt that goes through the base of the mast that ensures that the mast does not come out of its seating. Some boats are easy, and this is only for keel step masts. If you've got a mast that's deck step, then this is not a requirement. This is pretty easy to do. we're not here to talk a lot about this. Just the fact that all of these systems, you need to check. The water system, you go, oh, well, you know, we're just going to bring plastic bottles of water. That's not the way to do this. You can't throw it overboard. It adds a ton of space requirements to carry the water for a crew, you know, all the way on what is a 6 or 7 day trip in many cases. You want to be able to use the inherent water tanks that you've got in the boat. But to do that, you've got to make sure that that water is clean. And we're not going to go through all that here, but it's pretty simple to power wash or shock with chlorine, make sure that those water tanks are clean, and then put in you know, clean filtered water afterwards. Many people will put a charcoal filter somewhere in line, because if you leave a little bit of chlorine in the water, that will ensure that you don't get any growth over a few weeks period of time. But that charcoal filter will take out whatever residue you might have of chlorine, and you get really great tasting water. The water on Himmel, I think, is as good as what I get out of the house. And it's that way because we put a little bit of time and attention into ensuring that the water stays clean. And one of our crew members is a professional water guy, which really helped a lot. You know,
What's his name?
his name is Randy Pittman. And he's really good at it. He's the one who installed the charcoal filter, and it worked out well. So water system needs a little TLC, no doubt about it. Navigation steering, we'll talk about that. The big thing is make sure all your heavy items are well secured. That's your batteries to begin with. Some of you have lithium batteries that are a little lighter, but especially these AGM. I've still got AGM batteries, and they're 8Ds. They weigh 155 pounds each. That is the last thing you want flailing around in a cockpit, you know, if you were to get knocked down. So you've got to make sure that these things are well secured, and there's different ways to skin the cat on this. Engine maintenance, we talked a little bit about that. Dave, is that what your filter looked like last weekend?
Just about.
That's not a good sign. Yacht identification, most of these boats are federally registered. Normally, you're not a state registration. I highly recommend you get, and it's not expensive to get the boat documented through the federal system. And then you're required to have a yacht identification. They'll give you a number that is unique to that. It'll make it easier to go through customs and immigration in Bermuda or any other places that you're going. They look at a Maryland state registration. I've never seen anybody go in there, but I can't imagine they're going to understand what a Maryland state registration is when you get to Bermuda. And it's much less expensive than you might think. Signaling flares, wood plugs, all of this is listed. I'm not going to go through all of the details on this kind of stuff. There's a few things. Anchor with road is a requirement. Normally on a race like this, we don't want 150 feet of chain up in the bow. That's a lot of weight. So we'll put about 15 feet of chain, and then we've got nylon road, you know, for as much as we think. I don't know, do you carry, is that what you do on Allegiant? Do you have nylon road? Yeah.
We don't have full chains to
No, it's just too heavy. Some of the cruising boats might have it, but it is an awful lot of weight, and it's up in the bow too. All of these things, cockpit knife, storm sails, we'll talk EPIRBs. EPIRB is a requirement. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the electronic needs, which is coming up. PFDs, leg strap, whistle, light, reflective tape, and an AIS MOB for every crew. I talked about the new items. This is the second main new item for requirements for the 2026 race. And there are different ways of installing AIS MOBs. Who doesn't know what, you probably don't want to raise your hand, but who doesn't know what an AIS MOB is? Okay, everybody? No. They don't. Okay. Who knows what an AIS MOB is? Everybody knows. Okay. So if you go overboard, it will automatically start, and it will transmit via the AIS VHF frequencies your location to any chart plotter that is showing AIS information. Okay, which should be your boat, because your boat generally has a chart plotter that will show it because you're required to have an AIS transceiver on board your boat. It's very helpful in that it tells you where that person is, not where that person was when you hit the AIS. When you hit the MOB button on your chart plotter, it tells you where you were at that time. It doesn't obviously tell you what drift that person is encountering, whether it's from winds or waves, in the few minutes it takes to get back. It's going to tell you their exact location. So it's very helpful in that regard, and it is now a requirement. You'll see that there's different models. There are ACR and Ocean Signal, which are now owned by the same company, sell these, and they're the best one is actually here at Faucets. I think you get a 15% discount, and I think they've got 6 or 8 here that could be purchased if you so desire. Whether the skipper buys them for all their crew or whether the crew buys them and who's getting their PFD, that's for the skippers and crew to decide, you know, how you wish to work that. But it is a requirement. And wearing the PFDs while this is not in our safety and equipment because it's not something we can inspect. But it's strongly encouraged that everyone wears a PFD. It's going to be in the NORs, right?
No, it's going to be in the SIs.
Go ahead.
I'm Sharon Hadsel, principal race officer for this race and have been for a number of years. We have added in the SIs this year, so please do pay attention when we publish them. Guidelines for when PFDs should be worn unless the skipper specific or person in charge specifically tells you that you may take it off. We also speak to tethers, so that is new this year. It will be in the SIs, and your out is the person in charge can change what we say, but we are really concerned about your safety. And you're going to find that this is a requirement for many, many of the offshore races. We didn't have it at the last race, but we have it for this race. Additionally, on the AIS MOB, be advised that if yours is activated by water, which most of them are, if you're on deck and it gets wet enough and it goes off, please tell your skipper that that happened, because the Coast Guard will call me and say, there's an AIS MOB on this boat. And we had it happen. They were embarrassed and didn't tell their skipper. But please tell your skipper. These are really important safety things that are just vital. Okay? And I'll be around if people want to ask questions.
And I would try it. After you get these AIS MOBs, whether it's for you as a skipper or crew members, I would take one of them, or you could try all of them. And there is a test mode that you can use that will allow you to see if it functions, and just as importantly, that you see the display, you know, on your chart plotter. Just don't assume these things are going to work for granted. Understand how they're going to work. You know, that's important. If you're not displaying AIS, for example, on your chart plotter, you're not going to see this. Well, do you understand how your chart plotter works and how you can put the layers up for these kind of things? This is all critical, you know, for all of this to work. I can tell you on Himmel, our rules are that all crew members wear PFDs anytime they're on deck. Even if they're coming up just to take a leak off the back of the boat, they put a PFD on before they're going to do that. They wear tethers at night or when the watch captain dictates that the daytime conditions are rough enough to where we should be not only, you know, carrying tethers, but hooking up to, you know, what are the attach points, the hard points, or the jack lines that are on the boat. You'll see that when we go out there. Jack lines are needed on every boat. That's going to be one of the requirements that you'll see. And the jack lines are, generally they're like, what are they, Dave? Are they nylon?
Yeah, like 1 inch wide nylon.
Yeah, it's like
webbing.
1 inch nylons, you know, webbing. And it'll go from the stern of the boat on both port and starboard all the way up to the bow. So anybody who needs to go to the bow has an unobstructed method of getting all the way up without having to unattach and reattach because they're going by the shrouds or something along those lines. Yes, sir.
Years ago when I was doing research into those and I had just bought my boat, I just used a couple of sheets and found out that was a very bad thing to do because they don't have the stretch that nylon does. And it could have caused damage if anything had happened to either the boat or the person. So
That's a
it's
good
much,
point.
very important to have that type of material because it's an engineered stress
Mm-hmm.
when that 200-pound person gets thrown off the boat and a ton of water gets
Right.
on them.
And there's a couple techniques, you know, you want them tight, right? And so the best way to do that is wet them before you install them on the boat. So when they dry out, they'll tighten up and you get them, bing! It'll be real tight, you know, to the thing. And that's good, except that remember when you're going up at night, you know, sort of lift it up and hold it as you go up so that it's not dragging along the deck for 35 feet, waking up 4 crew members that are trying to sleep down below. So, little things. We talked a little bit about the MOB. I did want to mention one thing here. The MOBs that they've got here with faucets right now are the ACR is the brand. They're called the PLB 450s. And they're on sale for $548 each. They're the highest end one. You can, if you go to defender.com, find some other ones that are made by Ocean Signal, now owned by ACR, or even ACR, that are less expensive, that are down in the 300s or so. But compare and contrast, there's advantages and disadvantages to each. One of the challenges, and I'm glad that Mustang will be doing that, is installing these AIS MOBs correctly within your PFD is as much technique as it is procedure. It's easy to screw it up, and they will be talking about how you do that so that it auto initiates when the PFD gets inflated. It doesn't normally work on water activation. The PFD will work on water activation, but the AIS MOB will work when a tab gets pulled, and that tab gets pulled when the PFD inflates. That's generally how they work. The batteries on these things, though, can last for, I think they're up to 5 years on the ACR. Man overboard module. There's MOM 8s. Some of you, a lot of people, to include ourselves, will use a MOM 8. And in essence, you just pull the pin on the top of it, and out comes a 6-foot tall pole that will auto-inflate with a light that will auto-light. It comes with a horse collar that person can utilize, as well as a drogue chute. And it does not stay with the boat, it stays with the person that goes man overboard. So normally what we do, and we practice this over and over again when we do sea trials, is there's 4 things you do when someone goes overboard. You yell man overboard, you assign a spotter who stands right in front of the helm and just points and gives distances to where that person is, and they try not to lose sight of that person. We'll pull this MOM 8 pin, especially if it's at night in any kind of rough seas. And then the other thing is you depress and hold the man overboard drill, a button on your chart plotter. Different ones have different buttons between Garmin and Raymarine, but I can tell you that one gentleman died because the person who was in charge of depressing and holding that button didn't hold it for the necessary 2-3 seconds that the manufacturer required, and they never got the MOB location, and they never found the guy. So that's one thing that, again, you practice in your MOB drills, and you let everybody go through all of these operations, to include being the skipper, at least in our boat. Life raft, there's lots of brands. You need to have a life raft that obviously is going to take your full crew. If you got a 6-man life raft with 6 crew, that's fine. We've got 8 on our boat, and they can be a valise or they can be a hard shell. We have a valise on ours that we keep. What do you have? Do you have a hard shell or?
We actually have 2 life rafts because we're 8, so we have both for 1 each.
You have 1 of each. Okay. Different ways to skin the cat, but they should be repacked. Generally, the repacking on these life rafts, it depends on which one, 3, 4, 5 years or so, and they can be repacked up at Vane Brothers up in Baltimore. They do a really good job up there.
Can you talk about the ISO standard for the life raft?
Yeah, if you look at the SERs, we don't require it to be a certain ISO standard. It can be also a world standard. It can be a U.S. standard. They've got the numbers of each of the regulations, but I would refer you. I'm sorry, I can't tell you what the ISO number is. It's all in the SERs though. There's a bigger page, and it does. So it doesn't have to meet. It could meet not just an ISO standard. It could meet another standard as well. Emergency steering. Now we're getting into some of the things that you'll do generally in a sea trial. And I'll talk a little bit about this. What we do, and I think just about every boat does this, is in April or May before the race, we'll get this. It's a required thing that all of the crew members attend this. We'll go out on a Saturday morning and we'll come back Sunday afternoon. And the whole purpose of that 2 days, maybe 36 hours, is to go through how do we steer the boat, for example, with the emergency tiller, or how do we do it if the rudder falls off and we have to use some other method of steering the boat. Okay, we'll go through life raft deployment. We'll go through EPIRB with where it is. We'll have a ditch bag, and we'll go through all of the items in the ditch bag so everybody's familiar with what's in the ditch bag and where is the ditch bag kept. We'll do the man overboard drills that we talked about a little bit earlier. We'll assign watches and have watches throughout the night so that we sail all the way through the night. And every 3 or 4 hours, depending upon your watch schedule, people will come off and come on. This is a good chance for the skipper to figure out how compatible is the crew. Does person A really not want to be on the same watch as person B? If you've got that kind of problem, you might want to look at your crew lineup just to begin with. But also, what's the experience level? Who are my 2 watch captains? Do I have foredeck experience to launch the spinnaker on each of those watches, even if it's at night, in 5-foot seas? Do I have somebody who can navigate and handle that chart plotter going down the Chesapeake Bay at 2 a.m. and they don't really know how that chart plotter works? Well, these are the kind of things you find out on sea trials, and it gives you a month plus before the race begins in June to figure out what training certain people need. Often, I know you do this on Allegiant as well, you'll have designated roles for most of the people. There'll be a medical guy or girl, right? Maybe you'll have a cook. Maybe everybody gets to be cook. You'll have someone who is the tactician for each watch. You'll have someone who's the navigator for each watch. You'll have the social media person who's the one who's out there taking happy snaps of everybody, who's going to put it up, on the social media account. That's something that we've not done because I can't find anybody who wants to do it.
It's actually required. It's in the SER, so.
Well, I need to tell that to some of my folks because they all look at their shoes when they ask who's going to be a social media person.
We can recommend somebody.
Yeah. So all of these kind of items, as well as every sail that we have on the boat, storm sails, trysails, everything else, all of those will get rigged and sailed during our sea trial. So that we come out of it, we probably come up with a dozen things by the end of the sea trial on what we need to fix, what we need to buy, or what process or procedure we need to refine that wasn't working well. I highly, highly recommend it, and to make sure it's at day and night. It's only at nighttime that you're going to find out, I've got no way of reading the autopilot because the backlit, is gone. Or, my depth indicator, the red background lighting isn't working anymore. So there's a ton of stuff that you'll do on sea trials. Yeah.
Can you maybe speak for a second during the inspection of how you come to the boat and what the skipper is expected to prepare to make that process a little smoother? Because we have a laid up, I guess. Is that what you do on him as well?
Yeah, we do. So this is something that your safety inspector will talk to you about. But as a prep for it, you'll lay out all of the required items that you'll see in there, whether it's your floodlight to your flashlights You may not have all your PFDs there because a lot of your crew members aren't going to be there for the safety inspection, and that's something that can be looked at later, but it's really the skipper needs to make sure that all of those crew members are coming with all of the required items in the PFDs. But there's flares, there's the ditch bag. You may not have the life raft, but that's okay. You know, if you're renting it, you won't have it till later. You just bring the life raft certification in with you. But you can put out all of these items to include the storm sails that can be on the deck of the boat, where the jack lines. So it will make the inspection go much easier if you've already got a lot of this stuff laid out and ready for inspection. But work that with your particular inspector beforehand. Electronics. You know, we used to say everybody would have like a satellite phone, right? Well, technology has changed. You know, now there's different ways that you can have a sat phone. You're required to have satellite voice text comm. It's got to be waterproof. There's a requirement that it be on while underway, so you may need to have it plugged in somewhere, or at least occasionally, so it can recharge over a 6-day race. We don't require that it be a sat phone. You can also go with, what are some of the other systems out there, folks?
Iridium.
Iridium. Iridium Goes is what we've used in the past. Exec if you want. We have gone with an Iridium Go because that meets our needs for downloading weather files. What's the latest flavor of the day in the last couple of years? Starlink, exactly. And Starlink is a suitable alternative for a sat phone, but you've got to be according to our regulations. Okay, sir.
If any of your crew have T-Mobile, they can sign up for the Starlink direct-to-cell mobile beta, and it does work offshore for texting right now, and it'll be expanding as we go through next summer.
Yep.
Bert. I just want to show, since they asked about the safety inspection, I just brought up the previous inspection card.
Okay.
If you wanted to highlight just like typically how the back and forth goes for them when they get.
Oh yeah. So this is what your safety inspector will come with, and he'll fill this out, and any deficiencies are going to be listed here as, you know, just handwriting in. And those are ones that need to be resolved before, you know, the boat is going to be passed. First aid manual, like jack lines, I can't read. Is this your writing?
This is my terrible writing.
Yes, West Point guys, I tell you. Crayons. They really use crayons.
Brick on deck, jack line, storm cells, tiller, planetine, crew, PEDs, headlamp, tethers, photo K, bladders, dorms.
So in this case,
I
I had.
thought this is Bloody Marys.
So in this case, I had told him that you send me a photo of all the PFDs laid out, you didn't have them, and then we call it a day. That's fine, we've done it in the past. And then at the bottom, you know, the skipper leaves with this, so we both sign it, and then he knows exactly what he has to do. I take a photo shot of it, and then there's just dialogue between me and the safety inspector to make sure that he meets those. And then I tell Don, as the safety chair, that that person has met the requirement.
Yep, good point. Thanks.
Hey, John.
Sir.
While you're talking about satellites, if anybody wants to borrow a mini Starlink, talk to me. I'll let you borrow one for the race. I'll talk you through it.
Okay.
So if it helps anybody on their expenses to race it.
Yep.
You can have it.
Yell out your full name just so they know.
John Schaefer, Ministry of Sailing.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, different ways to skin the cat on the SATCOM. Virtually everyone is going to be downloading grid files, you know, the weather files. They come out every 6 hours. The really diehards will be doing this, you know, within 60 minutes of when the grid files get updated, just to see how that might affect. And then they'll put it into their route optimization software to see whether or not that's going to change their actual route to get to Bermuda. You know, that's speed. That's not safety. You know, but downloading the grid files is very helpful because it'll tell you a little bit about what kind of winds you're going to encounter and when you might need to reef or change your sails beforehand. I know when we had a Annapolis to Newport race, not this one, but the one before it, you know, there was like 25 knots on the bow. Some of you will remember this race in 2023.
Yep.
And it was 25 knots on the bow for the 300 plus miles to get to Newport. And so we knew it was coming, and so we changed, we changed our jib from the Genoa down to a blade jib well before we got out of the bay, just to get ready for it, because it's tough to change some of these sails in 6-foot seas and 25 knots of wind. Depends on whether you've got them roller furled and 2 furlers or whatever else. One thing that we did do that some people will do as well is they'll rig an inner forestay on their boat if it isn't already there. And on that inner forestay you could carry, for example, a storm jib, or you could carry a staysail. And if it's a temporary inner forestay, in other words, you don't have to have it on, you can detach it from the deck and then lash it to the mast, so it's still on the boat when you need it, but when you don't need it, the Jenny can still tack very well with an open area on your foredeck. That's up to you, but it does give you more flexibility on sail plans when you can furl the Jenny, for example, and just go to the staysail when you're offshore, and without having to drop that Jenny and put up another sail, which can be challenging in tough conditions. Single sideband, you'll see you can buy a fairly inexpensive single sideband radio. GPS, AIS, we've already talked about that. Paper charts are required for Bermuda as well as the North Atlantic and the Chesapeake. You should have those anyway. They're very helpful. But some people will put a paper chart up on their bulkhead down below, and every 12 or 24 hours they'll just note what their position is, as you go across. Another thing that's not required, but you can keep a log every hour, every 2 hours. Normally we do it on the half hour so that it doesn't interfere with watch changes. We'll just note latitude, longitude, speed, heading, what our sail configuration is, and just as importantly, the battery voltage, okay, which is going to go down, folks, especially if you don't have newfangled generators on board, or solar panels or whatever else, as well as the barometric pressure, so we can see changes in that. And it's just a form I print out, and everybody knows how to fill it out. Crew, we talked about this, trying to assign somebody. It's nice to have a mechanical engineer on board to fix shit. Dave, raise your hand. Okay, that's our mechanical engineer. You're doing everything. Race prep. We already went through this. I got ahead of myself before. The MOB drills. One thing we'll do with MOB drills is we've got 8 people in our crew. We will put everybody on the helm for an MOB drill. Normally like a quick stop maneuver, because that's what we generally do during the daytime when it's relatively calm. And then we'll do nighttime MOB drills. We won't put everybody on the helm for that, because that would take a long time. And then we'll do MOB drills with the spinnaker up and you're downwind, and then we'll culminate it at night with the spinnaker up, half the crew down below. We got 4 guys up, or girls or whatever, up on board, and one of those goes over. So now you've got 3 people on the boat with 4 down below, and the spinnaker's up, and someone goes over. And how are you going to deal with that? That's the most challenging situation. It's hard to throw in 5-foot waves when it's only a foot waves in the Chesapeake Bay. You can't simulate that. But I highly recommend you come up with a plan. Again, this is all your sea trials. How are you going to get the life raft out of the boat? These are heavy things. An 8-man valise weighs over 100 pounds. It's a 2-man lift to get it out of our locker and get it over the side. Emergency steering, there's different ways to skin the cat. We can talk about that afterwards. We've been going for a long time on that. But you do want to have some way to steer the boat without a rudder. And then storm sails. This is actually one of the ways. This is sort of the way that we use, although this is a little inaccurate here. we'll have a drogue on a chain that will tow behind the boat, and then there'll be we use a spin sheet, and it doesn't go to the stern of the boat. If it did, you'd never be able to balance around it. It goes up to a snatch block right here, and then back to a winch on both sides of the boat. So you're putting the center of momentum is from the center of the boat. It'll turn easier with that, and you can tighten or loosen these port and starboard spin sheets to offset that drogue, either port or starboard, and combine that with the fact that you have sail pressure, right? You've got a main and a jib up, and by sheeting in the main, you can have the boat turn more towards the wind. Just the opposite with the jib. If you ease the jib, it will turn more into the wind. So you can use differential sheeting as well as the differential work with the spin sheets through your winches to go ahead and turn the boat. It can be somewhat disappointing when you do this. And part of the reason because it's disappointing is the darn rudder is still on the boat, right? And you normally will center the rudder, and whatever you're trying to do with differential steering is being countermanded by the fact that the friggin' rudder is still on the boat and going straight. You can check, there's a video of a J-boat back around 10 years ago where they intentionally took off the rudder, and they went out and they tried the differential steering as well as with the differential sail pressure, and it worked much more effectively than it is when you've got still the rudder on the boat. But you still need to do this. It's a little tricky to get the drogue, into the water and get everything set up. Again, this is part of what your sea trials should be going for. There are too many boats that have been left abandoned in the ocean for the simple fact that somebody didn't know how to steer the damn boat without a rudder. You don't want your boat to do that. These are good email addresses for both myself as well as for Bert as the chair. I think that's it. Questions that you might have? Comments, suggestions? Bert?
John, I don't know if you did talk or want to talk about the keel and rudder inspection. I put up the form that you...
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is the form. We mentioned that it's online. It'll be filled out generally by the skipper, or if you hire a surveyor to do it. And it's pretty straightforward. It goes through the items that we had on the slide there. If you want to scroll up, can you scroll up or down? Yep. There it is. I look at this, and the first thing you ought to do when your boat gets hauled out is check the keel. That's what the boats get hauled out partly for. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention something. I bought a PLV a couple years ago and was on a delivery. Had a couple days before we were really offshore, so I didn't do anything ahead of time. My fault. Someone had bought that and returned it after some other trip offshore, probably a race. And it was still registered with the authorities under the other person. It took me 3 days to get that changed, and then I returned it later because I wasn't even sure how long it had been used, and the store was unaware that someone returned that. So don't do that, but also take precautions to make sure you register right away so you're aware if that were the case.
That's a good point. The EPIRBs are the same way.
Yes.
They could be exchanged or returned or whatever else. Your AIS devices, need a MIMSI number, an MMSI number that has to be, you have to receive that MIMSI number. You can do it either through the FCC or you can do it through Boat US, but that number has to be implanted into the machine. And don't screw it up, because you don't, generally, depending upon how the system works, you don't have the opportunity to change that MIMSI number yourself. It has to be brought back to the manufacturer, unless one time, I think it was with Standard Horizon, I got to know this person who was on the phone because I had a bunch of other questions, and I finished up with the MIMSI number, and I said, it needs to be changed because blah, 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 blah. And he goes, okay, I'm gonna give you the password, but don't tell anybody. I'm like, oh, this is good. So I would save myself $150 by not having it brought in. Yes?
Just another comment, if you borrow somebody's,
Yeah.
keep these things in mind, that the emergency contact is going to be the people that own that device and registered it properly. So,
Regardless, every year log in and update your info to say that you're
Correct.
going to Bermuda, not Newport.
And generally, you'll get an email,
I do.
saying from the government, hey, it's expiring, because you'll get a sticker that goes on the ePerm, and that sticker is only good for 2 years, I think it is, 1 or 2 years. So that's a good time when you should be updating your emergency contact information as well. Yeah.
Hey, Don.
John.
When it comes to filling out the data form on your ePERS, on the bottom of the form when you fill in online, there's a spot in there that says other data. And as a safety at sea moderator, we always encourage the racers or whoever you are to fill out what your float plan is on that data, that other data. So as you're updating your MMSIs and as you're putting these things together, you can always go back before the race. In that other data, you put in where you're going to be racing, where your location is, the type of boat, the crew on every single one of those. Because if that ePerb does go off, it'll save time on the rest, because when they read that other data, they're going to know immediately, and so they can go directly now instead of, because usually their format is to go call the emergency number first. But it'll save you time if you fill that other data form in on those lists. It's very critical for all racing. And even if you're using an on-spot, they have emergency instructions on the on-spot, you can do the same thing there. So fill in that data, because minutes and seconds do make a difference in rescues.
And make sure your emergency contact, the first person you got, knows
Absolutely.
what you're doing. So,
Yes.
they can say, yeah, that's yes, they are racing to Bermuda. My dad told me they were going to race to Bermuda.
And don't have your emergency contacts to be people that are on the boat.
Yes. I bet that's happened. I bet that has happened.
It has happened.
Yeah. Bert and Maryland don't have emergency contacts of each other, just so you know that.
Well, we don't race together anymore, no, I'm just kidding.
Any other comments or questions?